Hey, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Garuda Indonesia Regional Business Class on board the Boeing 737-800 on my flight between Jakarta and Singapore in August 2025. I'm going to be reviewing the pre-flight experience at Jakarta Soekarno-Hatta Airport, including the Garuda Indonesia Business Class lounge, and then once we get on the plane, I'm going to review the seat, the facilities, the food and drink, and the arrival into Singapore Changi Airport. Our flight today between Jakarta and Singapore clocks in at just over 900 kilometers and takes barely over 1 hour in the sky. Because I was being dropped off at the airport, I didn't take any footage of the check-in, but the process was smooth, it was right next to immigration, and I was able to use the electronic gates, which meant from arrival to being through immigration took barely 10 minutes. Today, we're flying from Jakarta Airport Terminal 3, which is Jakarta's newest and most modern terminal. I'll start off by paying a visit to the Garuda Indonesia Business Class lounge. You get to this by walking straight ahead when you clear immigration, coming to this set of escalators, travelling up and doing a U-turn, and then at the back of the food area, somewhat hidden away, is the Garuda Indonesia lounge. I've got to say, despite the numerous signposts, this wasn't the easiest lounge to find. Its location it feels hidden, but when you get there, you realise that it's actually a very substantial lounge, and you wonder perhaps how you could have missed it. The entrance walkway is one of the nicer entrances I've seen to an airport lounge, and gives you a great flavour of both Indonesian culture and Garuda Indonesia history. If I could describe this lounge in one sentence, it would be perfectly pleasant, but not going to win any awards. It basically got the job done. It had everything you need, from seating, to food, to drink, to even a smoking room if that's your thing, and also a child room if you want somewhere to let your children play. But it was just hard to get excited about it. The food and drink was just kind of adequate. It wasn't brilliant, but it was hot and it filled you up. And I think that sort of sums up the entire lounge experience. Perfectly fine, but nothing to get excited about. I definitely wouldn't recommend coming here early before your flight. That said, if you find yourself at Jakarta Airport for a few hours before your flight, which you likely will because of traffic, then it's a perfectly fine place to spend some time before you board. Speaking of which, the lounge is located super conveniently for your flight. The lounge is at gate 10, and the Garuda Indonesia flight was departing from gate 9, meaning it only took about a 2-minute walk to get there. Unfortunately, boarding was delayed today, and so I waited for about 20 minutes to get on board. At least that gave me a little bit of time to take some footage of the 737-800 that was going to take us to Singapore, and also of a plane taking off. Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, please subscribe. I post twice a week. After about 20 minutes, we boarded, and I took my seat in seat 3K, which is a window seat on the right-hand side. As you can see, the seats are arranged in a 2-2 configuration. I was lucky in that I didn't have a seatmate for this flight, although do bear in mind, if you're travelling solo, it's highly likely that you will. In terms of legroom, you certainly won't be going short. It's not a lie-flat bed, but you will in no way, shape or form be cramped in this seat. Plenty of legroom. There's also a sizable armrest between the seats, so you certainly won't be competing with your seatmate with where to put your arms. At the front of the cabin is a little video screen. This is where they play the safety video. Each seat comes with its own in-flight entertainment, which is controlled by this quite old-fashioned remote control. I'll be honest, it wasn't that responsive, and I found it easier to use the touchscreen. The headphones were much better than your standard economy headphones. They were noise cancelling, padded, and quite comfortable to use for the flight. The seat is controlled by these manual buttons, which are very intuitive and extremely easy to understand. Despite the flight being barely over an hour, a full hot meal was served. Today, you had a choice of chicken rice, nasi bali, or stir-fried fish and prawns. A starter and dessert are also offered, although they weren't listed on the menu, and I will review this fully later in the video. In addition to the food, a full bar is offered, including champagne, a number of spirits, and a few wine options. Today, I opted for the chicken rice. This was okay. Not going to set the world alight, but for a 1-hour flight, just great to get a hot meal. On many airlines, particularly Western ones, you'd barely get a sandwich, if anything at all, on a flight of this length. This was served with a bread basket with some fresh butter on the side. In addition, even though these weren't listed on the menu, it came with a salad with a Japanese sesame dressing and smoked salmon, and also a dessert, which was a mango mousse cake. I ended up eating most of what was served, and to be honest, it tasted alright. It's definitely not going to win any culinary awards, but for a 1-hour flight, more than adequate and great to fill you up. I went for a Coke Zero during my meal service, and for the post-meal drink, I was surprised to be offered the choice of an iced coffee. You can sometimes request this on airlines, but it's very rarely proactively offered. This was cool and refreshing and really hit the spot as we made our approach into Singapore. One thing you should note about this flight is that the in-flight entertainment screen effectively pops out of your armrest and is quite small. There was nothing wrong with it, and it had enough movies and television shows in both Indonesian and English to keep me entertained for the duration of the flight. Just in case you can't find anything you like, there are 2 large windows for each passenger in business class, giving you great views out over on your journey. In what felt like no time at all, the captain came on the speaker to announce we were beginning our descent into Singapore. It was a very clear day as we made our approach, and I got some great views looking out onto the islands below. I also managed to catch this cool footage of the plane skimming along the clouds as it made its descent.
2025, Garuda Indonesia has also resumed its Jakarta to Samarinda service to support better connectivity to East Kalimantan.
In line with recent feedback, I'm not going to be speeding up the landing. Let me know in the comments if you prefer this. Quite a bumpy landing, and unfortunately it was raining once we got to the ground. However, the taxi to the gate took only about 5 minutes, and being business class passengers, we were first to deplane. We pulled into the A gates, which meant we were right next to immigration. It took maybe a minute to walk from the gate to the immigration. We were arriving a few days before Singapore's National Day, and so there was a great SG60 display before you turned onto the immigration, which, as usual for Changi, took under a minute. There was no queue, and I was able to use the electronic gates. Honestly, I have no idea how they did this. It literally took me a minute to walk from the gate to the immigration, and then immigration took 1 minute, and yet as soon as I arrived, the bags came out. Changi Airport is normally pretty quick to get the luggage out, but this has got to be a record. Really well done. Overall, I would rate this flight a 4 out of 5. Look, there was nothing wrong with it. As a way to get between Jakarta and Singapore, it was very pleasant. The only reason I'm hesitant to give it more is because I compare it to Singapore Airlines, which flies on the same route. Whereas on the Garuda flight, you get their regional configuration. On Singapore Airlines, you get a lie flat bed. The food and drink, whilst perfectly fine, just wasn't up to the same standard as you would typically get on SQ. Further, whilst it was great to see that they had in-flight entertainment on a 1-hour flight, again, Singapore Airlines has got high-definition, large screens built into the back of the seat. It just doesn't compete. I wouldn't hesitate to fly this airline again, and in fact, I will. And let's be honest, even with the comparisons to SQ, this business class product is miles better than SQ economy. The only thing I'd say is if your employer or your air miles give you the choice between Garuda or Singapore Airlines on this route, you know which one to pick.